episode 3. So I wanted to talk about boundaries, and I think this is going to be just part 1 of boundaries, because it's something that's been coming up for me to really focus on right now in my growth. I mean, boundaries, it's been a learning lesson on this journey towards learning to love myself in the path of authenticity, but more so right now I'm being called to focus on energetic boundaries, which I will focus more on probably the next video of like what I learned more about in terms of my process. But I just wanted to at least discuss so far just what boundaries are about. So boundaries, they are pretty much like our invisible space of where we begin and where others end. And it kind of helps us claim our own identity and our own internal experience. And it helps us separate just our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors and actions from those of others. And we develop boundaries, we're supposed to develop boundaries as we're growing up through our relationship with our parents, but due to maybe any trauma or negative experiences we went through, not just within our family, but just within the greater whole, these negative experiences and these traumas can end up making it really difficult for us to claim our own space. So we end up developing these defenses in order to feel safe in the world, or to maybe feel protected, because eventually as we're growing up, we want to be able to feel safe and protected within. But as kids, we're so vulnerable that we rely on our parents or those around us to provide that safety and that connection and that warmth and that protection. And when we don't receive that growing up, the world is really unsafe, and that's what leads a lot to our anxieties and our fears. And so that's kind of when we don't feel safe in the world, that's when we kind of develop these like habits, these like addictions, or we get in our head, or in relationships, like any sort of friendships or relationships, we may end up becoming so overly attached to the person that we're unable to separate what's our thoughts and our feelings from the other person, or maybe because we haven't really developed, like we haven't been validated or seen for who we are growing up. So that's another big thing. Like growing up, it's important that we're reflected back, we're seen in a way where we're able to trust our experience, our thoughts, our feelings, how we see the world, to kind of develop our own identity. But sometimes what happens is, if we're not fully seen as kids for our own experience by our caregivers or by whatever experience, like just in our environment, we have a hard time trusting or knowing what's ours versus others. We have a hard time being able to just establish our identity. So when we look outside to the outside world, we're kind of basing more of our experience based off of what's outside of ourselves, because we haven't had anybody to reflect or any firm foundation to mirror back to us, to repeat back to us what we're experiencing, because as kids we have no idea. So that's what kind of makes us more vulnerable to going outside of ourselves, to find our identity, to feel safe, to feel protected. And that putting our identity outside of ourselves and our power outside of ourselves makes us so vulnerable to drama and chaos and just feeling out of control and not safe at all. And so that's where it becomes really important to learn to develop boundaries, to know what's ours versus what's not ours. But here's the thing, is that with all the trauma work, it takes time to be able to heal and release the wounds, because from our negative past experiences, we've developed these survival patterns and these behaviors that have us acting in ways where we end up recreating the same drama or the wounds, or we push people away, and it ends up leading us to being more hurt. And we're unable to feel connected within. We're not able to connect with others. We don't know who we are. We can't tap into our power. And so everything just is chaotic. And so we get to boundaries once again, though, through digging deep, healing, excavating our wounds, doing trauma work. It takes a lot of inner work, a lot of feeling our feelings. And it also takes, we're relational beings too. So on the path of authenticity and learning to love ourselves, it also takes those around us, maybe a therapist or somebody who can help us, who can help mirror back our experience and help us kind of learn to gain trust back into the world in order to feel safe in our bodies. Because think about it, we don't feel safe because we don't know what we're experiencing. Our bodies haven't been a safe space for us at all, because we haven't been anchored enough in, we haven't been nurtured or loved growing up to be able to really know what's like safe or not, or what's true or not for us. And so with the help of support, as we kind of learn about our identity, and learn about our internal experience, that's kind of how we're able to establish boundaries. And with boundaries, it helps us reclaim our sense of self, because without boundaries, we lose ourselves, we abandon ourselves really easily. But with too much boundaries, we also are very rigid, and we shut people out, we protect, we just shut people out, and we're really firm. So those are usually like the big extremes of boundaries, is like you either totally become shut down your whole experience and fuse and become one with who's ever you're joining with, that you adopt all of that, or you shut people off and you're so guarded that you don't let people in because you just don't. So both of those are just they're not healthy at all. But we also have to have compassion for ourselves, because that's kind of how we learned how to survive in the world. If you went through abuse and trauma, it may have been that you had to drop your experience and please others in order to get that approval or that love. And so you learned you had to abandon yourself, or you learned you couldn't trust yourself. Or in the other extreme, if you ended up getting so hurt, the safest thing was to go away and to cave in and to protect yourself. So with boundaries also, we have different types of boundaries. We have mental boundaries, so it's they help protect our own freedom to think and have our own beliefs. And that's why it's really important when we exchange ideas with others that we're respectful of other people's perspectives, and we don't push our beliefs and force our beliefs on other people, because we want to respect people's own identity and outlooks, and we also need to respect ours. And then we have also boundaries around our feelings, right? So what's our feelings versus what's other feelings, and also around it could be tied to religious beliefs too. You have your own path, your own way of doing things, and you respecting other people's way of doing things. Sexual boundaries, what you feel safe in, what you value for yourself versus what you don't feel safe doing, and maybe you feel just boundaries protect whatever our wants and our needs are. But if we don't know what our wants and our needs are, especially from all the trauma we've gone through growing up and all the negative experiences, it will be really difficult to have boundaries. And then we get ourselves into situations that cause us a lot of pain and suffering. For instance, maybe, you end up going along with something, which I'm sure y'all can relate to. You go along with something and then you're like, oh my God, this doesn't feel good, or like, I don't really want to do this. Or you get really hurt. Maybe you get really disrespected, and that's kind of your signal of like your boundary was violated, you know? But it's also on the path to our sovereignty and our authenticity. It's like we also have to take responsibility for knowing our limits, knowing what we need, and being proactive to taking care of ourselves in that way. But at the same time, we also have to acknowledge our past of how we were wounded, or how we were, whatever traumas we experienced, and we have to forgive we have to allow ourselves to go through the healing process of allowing ourselves to get pissed over our past abuse, because our anger is really beautiful and powerful in helping us really push past, like, acknowledge what we went through is really like awful, but at the same time we can't stay stuck in it. So it helps fuel our healing process to then become empowered, which that will probably be another video. But anyways, so with boundaries, once again, this is just something that really helps us know ourselves, take care of ourselves, and create space for ourselves so we can really separate what's our own internal world versus others. If we don't take time out to have boundaries, we are lost in other people's beliefs, expectations, and whatnot. I can't tell you how many countless times I've gotten so lost or abandoned myself because maybe I get into a situation where I get really triggered, and it triggers like a previous trauma, and then I just like, in the past I've totally shut down and frozen because that was kind of my trauma pattern, and just submit to what the other person wants or what the other person needs, and then I kind of have lost my voice. And that's kind of where our boundaries, like wherever we have a previous negative experience or like a trauma point, that's kind of where we end up. Like if we get like activated or triggered, that's kind of where we like shut down, and like maybe we like, whatever our defense is, maybe we overreact, and like that's how we deal with our emotional boundaries, is like we were really like aggressive, or maybe like we shut down. You know, with trauma there's fight, flight, or freeze. So maybe you get overly aggressive, or you shut down, or you like run. That's kind of like an indication that like some wound has gotten triggered. And if we don't have proper boundaries in place, we get caught up in these survival patterns around these our boundaries. So anyways, I just wanted to give you a little heads up. This is kind of a reoccurring thing for me in terms of like continuing to reclaim my sovereignty and my authenticity, because without boundaries we abandon ourselves. And it's really beautiful that we really make boundaries, learning about boundaries and integrating them a priority, because that's how we reclaim our personal power, and that's how we know who we are, and we can really stand in our power and assert our worth. And our boundaries help us be in our center. It helps us protect and stay safe within our center. If we don't have boundaries, we easily flop back and forth, up and down, and disconnect from our center. But it's really important that we do the inner work that clears the space to help us tap back into our center, tap back into our power, to set those boundaries, and to know who's safe and who's not safe, with opening ourselves up. That's the thing with boundaries, is with some people, you know, like obviously, well, in any relationship you're going to want to still maintain boundaries, but obviously your boundaries are going to be a little more open in like an intimate relationship or a close friendship rather than like a stranger, you know? And as we heal more and we get more connected and we maintain more boundaries and we're more connected to our center and our intuition, we're able to sense like who's safe and who's not, which will end up protecting us, and knowing that we still feel safe. And I am going to leave it at that for part 1. I have a feeling that this is going to be something I'll continue talking about. I'm going to leave it at that for part 1 of boundaries. I love you all, and until the next clip.